I'm Pastor Dick, and this is our fourth session in looking at the Fireproof video and our discussions on that. And we just viewed a section where Caleb and his wife are arguing about the boat which he wants to buy for $24,000. Later on, however, when her mom needs a bed and a wheelchair and some other things, and she goes to get some equipment for that, she finds out that the doctor that she thought she was falling in love with was not the one who paid the $24,000, but Caleb was. Obviously, he had taken the money that he was going to buy for his boat, and he bought all the equipment for his wife's mother. And so that's what we're picking up in our discussion this morning. And I want to direct your attention, really, to begin with, to question number 3. Question number 3 on page 80. We'll look at that one for just a second. Question number 3 says, at the time Caleb paid for the medical equipment, Catherine was still planning to divorce him. So there was a very real possibility Caleb would spend the money for the equipment and still wind up divorced from Catherine. Put yourself in Caleb's position. How difficult would it be for you to make that decision? In your own life, have you ever made a risky decision out of love for someone? And if you do, share that story as a part of your discussion. Think about that for a minute. That's why it's 2 weeks later and so forth. At that time, when he decides, and he's in somewhere in the Love Dear book, and he decides that he's not going to take the $24,000 for his boat, but he's going to provide Catherine's mother's medical needs, for her medical needs. What do you think he's thinking? What do you think he's thinking when he does that?
Well, at that point in time, he had to came to the conclusion that this marriage is worth salvaging, and I need to do something to show some love.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, having said that, yeah, he did that, but didn't let her know.
Right.
So, I think it was working on him, it was his inner...
what God was doing in his heart.
Yeah, what God was doing
right.
in him, that he just knew he needed to do the right thing, and he was just taking the chance that it would work out.
Right. Remember in the beginning when he's doing the flowers, if you want to call them that, he's making her coffee and that kind of stuff. Why is he doing those things? His dad challenges him, why are you doing those things?
He's doing it for himself.
Yeah. Exactly. He was doing them for himself to try to get her not to divorce him to save their marriage. It was very, very selfish, okay? And, the buying of the flowers was not a big deal. Remember the discussion? He's going, how much are they?
Yeah.
What's the least one I can buy? And so he's looking at the least amount of money he has to spend on her. And he's doing it, as you said, Harold, because he felt like he needed to do this out of selfish reasons. But now he's giving $24,000 on a chance that this is not going to win her over, which is why he doesn't tell her. He could tell her, hey, I paid for that money, but he doesn't. He tells the lady there not to tell anybody who gave that money. So he's not doing it for selfish reasons at all. He's doing it because he really loves her. And whatever happens, that money is already spent. It's gone. So imagine what's going on in his mind. It's totally different from when he buys the flowers, isn't it? It's, I'm doing this regardless of how she responds, and I'm doing it regardless of what happens. If she divorces me, I will be totally broken about that, but I'm doing what God has directed me to do. Now, is that difficult in a marriage? Is it difficult to do something not because you want to get something from your spouse, and regardless of how your spouse responds to it? Is that difficult or not? Or do you keep doing that, regardless of how your spouse responds? Do you keep giving? Do you keep doing? Remember we talked about a covenant? It's not a contract. What's the contract? 50-50. I do my part if she does hers. This is not a contract. This is a covenant. I do my 100% part regardless of what she does. That's what he's come to understand here. This is an unconditional love. There's a covenant there. It's interesting. I was reading in a book last night a story of a woman who left her husband. And he calls her up and he tells her, I love you, won't you please come home for me and the kids, And she says, no, I'm not coming home. And he tries that several times to call her, and we love you and we want you to come back home. No. He knows where she is. She's actually on the other side of the country, okay? And so he takes his money, gets a plane ticket, flies out there, and says to her, I love you, won't you please come home? And she says, yes, I will. He says, what made the difference? She said, one was only words, second was actions. You came to get me. Rather than just calling me on the phone and saying, I love you, won't you please come home? Our actions a lot of times speak so much louder than our words do. And so his action here is just overwhelming. I mean, I've never had $24,000 in my life to give to somebody. Anybody. My wife keeps saying, if I could just have one thing, I'd love to have a piano. Well, that's $3,000, $4,000. It's like, well, I don't have $3,000, $4,000. We know we don't have $3,000, $4,000 to do that. If I ever get $3,000 or $4,000, if one of you ever dies and puts me in your will, I'll buy it for you. But I don't exactly see that happening anytime soon. So it's not like I've ever had $24,000 to do that kind of spending. If I had it, I'd do that. I really would. But that's a huge commitment for us, isn't it? To do those things, not on a $24,000 scale, but just on a smaller scale, to do those kinds of things for our spouse. Look at the story that they talk about on page 81. It's the story of David and Jonathan. It says, the Bible has many stories of love, including the dramatic, sacrificial love of Jesus described in the New Testament Gospels. The Old Testament has an amazing story of unconditional love as well. And that love existed between the unlikeliest of friends. He was a prince in the nation of Israel, the eldest son of an heir of the first anointed king. If Jonathan looked like the Bible's description of his father Saul, then he was tall and handsome. He certainly would have met anyone's expectations for a future king. Popular with the Israelites, he was a mighty warrior, a leader in his father's armies, and known for being the first into a battle. In an account found in 1 Samuel 14, the Israelites are facing their sworn enemies, the Philistines. And Jonathan slips away from the main force, trusting in the God of his fathers to guide him as he attacks the edge of the Philistine army. He was the clear heir apparent to the throne of Israel, until his father Saul turned away from God, and the prophet Samuel was sent to anoint a young shepherd boy named David. The warrior prince's response to the young David was selfless and almost inexplicable. It says, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. From that time on, Jonathan guarded David and honored God's choice of him as the future king. He warned David about threats from King Saul and even stood up to his father in David's defense. In an angry response, Saul chastised Jonathan and pointed out the threat David posed. As long as the son of Jesse lives on the earth, neither you nor your kingdom will be established. Still, Jonathan selflessly loved the very one who would supplant him as king. But if my father is inclined to harm you, may the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if I do not let you know and send you away safely. May the Lord be with you as he has been with my father. After David fled from Saul and surrounded himself with fighting men, Jonathan braved the threat from David's new army and traveled to his rival's camp to encourage him. And Jonathan was eventually slain in battle along with his father, King Saul. But the valiant prince's unconditional love for his friend preserved King David's life. And Jonathan's obedience to God opened the way for a covenant between the Lord and David, which was ultimately fulfilled in Jesus, the Messiah descended from the house of David. You ever think about that? You ever think about the love that Jonathan had for David? Not a wrong kind of love in any stretch of the imagination, but a kind of love which now says, I will not only give up $24,000, I will give up my kingdom. I'll give up me being king because I know God has anointed you as the king. What must that have been like for Jonathan to do that kind of love? What do you think he was thinking of?
Totally a servant in that situation.
Okay, totally a servant in that situation. Okay, somebody else. What do you think Jonathan was thinking in that particular situation? How would you feel if you were Jonathan? You were the king's son, and all of a sudden you knew that this guy over here was really going to get the throne, and that was okay with you. Put yourself in Jonathan. How would you feel?